Hey everybody, my name is Anthony and welcome to my channel. With this video we continue a series of cinematography breakdowns called The Lighting Game, where we go through some examples from movies and commercials, breaking down the lighting, framing and finding some interesting ideas that we all can borrow from these shots and put these ideas into our cinematographer's toolkit. In the previous episode we went through a couple of scenes from the Peaky Blinders, and I already got some requests to make one more video for this TV series, and you can find the previous episode right here. In this video we will take a look at a couple of scenes from No Country for an Old Man, shot by the legendary Sir Roger Deakins. And throughout the breakdown you will see how masterfully Deakins escapes the front lighting situation in favor of side lighting. So I think we can call this episode Side Lighting for an Old Man. If you like this content, please consider subscribing. Without further ado, let's get started. In this scene, the man sitting behind the desk, this man hires Carson Wells, the man wearing a hat, to stop Anton Chigurh murders and help finding the money after the drug deal gone wrong, if you can remember the plot. Carson walks into the room, has a couple of lines of dialogue, and then sits down as his banker or whoever it is asks him questions about Anton. So we are starting with a wide shot to establish the geography of the scene, and right away we see this giant, enormous window on the background, almost the size of the wall. I don't know whether they were shooting this scene on location or it's a studio build with a trans light behind the window, but the production design is absolutely awesome. Notice how this dark wood everywhere, all these dark wood walls, they soak up all the light bounce in the room. Even though we have this size of the window, very big window, the scene is not flat lit at all. And we have multiple layers in this shot, this nicely exposed window with buildings and sky outside. This is the first layer, then this banker sitting behind the desk with his practical light, let's use another color, this practical light turned on, yes, during the day, quite sunny day with an enormous window, but it looks cool in movies. Then Carson staying, this is a middle ground, and then we have this foreground of tables, niches in the wall, all these chairs, and of course these practicals turned on again, dimmed, but adding some depth. So there are a lot of layers in this shot to give a 3D dimensionality. The dark wood soaks up all the light, and thanks to it, the Carson has his back nice and dark, so we don't have to use a lot of negative fill. One more thanks for a production design for having these louvers on the giant window. They look very nice. As you can see, the ceiling is actually of a brighter color, but Sir Roger Deakins frames the shot so we just see a hint of it. Just a hint of this bright ceiling. The rest is dark interior. Alright, switching to over the shoulder with Carson staying, and here's where we start seeing this side light effect. So imagine a person staying in the shot like this actor in front of the giant window that is behind the camera now. Guess what? He would have been completely front lit, completely flat, as the light comes from all this giant surface in front of him. Instead, what we see here? Contrast on his face. The light comes only from one side. So what to do to achieve this? You might want to block part of the window that is frame left with black cloth, black duvetine, and place a couple of floppies. I'm painting it not black, but they're black, couple of black floppies on the left side of the shot. That will help provide more contrast on his fill side, so soaking up the reflected light and making it a bit dark on his fill side. The goal here is to fight the flat front light, transforming it to more interesting side light like we have here. This also has some effect on the gentleman, on the foreground, on his back, and in situations like this, you will have much more level on the gentleman sitting on the foreground than the level on the Carson, because the gentleman here sitting much closer to the light source, to the window, and for his back not shining too much, you might want to place some nets on the light way between the window and his back. Now Carson sits down, and with this over the shoulder on the banker, let's call him banker, we see the exact same effect, side lighting. Look at the light level behind this giant window. Look at the level of the sky and level on the buildings. For me, it's now most certain that it's a studio build, because it's so low, the level is so outside is so low, it doesn't compete with the key level on this person. To do this on the real location, you need to pump so much level into the room to balance the inside and outside exposure. That becomes quite expensive, not to mention this is not first floor. But with a trance light in the studio, you just light the trance light, this trance light outside this fake window in the studio wall. You are in full control over its level, and thus you are in full control of the level you need for the key light for this person. Okay, for this guy with the window behind his back, you need to place a light source in the room. So some light source from frame left, soft light source, giving key light to him. And for this particular shot with dark wood everywhere in shot, you might not even need a neck fill from the right side. This is the amount of contrast, the amount of level you will have in the room from the ambient light. So this is the amount of contrast you naturally have in this room. And practical on the table behind. It's not super warm, but quite desaturated. Now let's take a look at a tighter shot for the same person. And all the tighter shots and close-ups for this person are ready to shoot if you have previous lighting setup in place. So we have this big soft source as his key light coming from frame left. And notice how this soft key light creates and gives these nice highlights in his eyes. So these little sparkles of light, the reflections of this big soft source. So you may need to slightly tweak the position of the key light. So you have to probably move it back and forth and to the sides a bit to catch these reflections in the eyes. It takes minutes, but it adds a lot to this shot. Single on Carson now, and side light again. The same principles we saw on medium shot. So we block all the light coming from frame left with black material, black duvetine, floppies, place some neck fill if you need more contrast, and you have a person sitting in front of the giant window, but side lit, nicely. Let's also mention the wardrobe. We have actor wearing bright costume against a darker background, so no need to worry about separation because it's already there. No need to worry about backlight. And to spice up the background, so Roger Deakins set these practical lights on both sides of the shot, dimmed down and quite desaturated in color, just giving some nice light spots in the background. And the rest of the scene is played on over the shoulders and singles like this. And I think it's a nice example of controlling the light, come into the shot, make shot interesting and retain a lot of contrast. But why not looking at one more? And here we are, the sheriff having a conversation with his workmate. All the action is parallel to big windows on the background, these two big windows, and the camera is perpendicular. So there is a wall, frame right, here, and these two big windows behind are supposedly the only light sources in this shot. In the real world, we would have this policeman staying in shot completely backlit by these two big windows. But we need to see his face. So we place his key light, softbox presumably, or some soft source, from frame right, giving a key light to his face. And now he is magically side lit. Notice that Sir Roger keeps these light quite sidey, so it's placed somewhere around maybe 4 o'clock, and it gives a lot of contrast to his face. So we are given an impression that this light comes from this right window. The highlights on the windows are not blown out. We still see some details outside, and this adds additional layer of depth. So we see details outside, and these giant windows, big windows with louvers again, then this extra, then the policeman staying, and then the back of the sheriff. This is how many layers we have in this shot. Switching to over the shoulder on the sheriff, and this is a tricky shot. You gotta be very careful since we are now pointing at a person sitting in front of the light. Remember these big windows that are behind the camera now. And in real life, it means flat and boring. But not in the Deakins work. He again slips away from front lighting. He avoids the front lighting from the windows. He escapes the flat look. He adds a neg fill from frame right. It's a negative fill, black floppy. Creates some contrast from this side. Also, this guy staying in the foreground helps blocking some light on the right side, so it helps for this negative fill. And here we are again, side lighting. What a nice shot. Let's take a look at tighter shots from this sequence. And the camera is positioned now a bit higher than it was during over the shoulder shot, since we don't want an extreme low angle for the tighter shots and close-ups. But at the same time, we cannot shoot at eye level, of course, so we have to find a middle ground. As it usually happens, the fill light, the light from this, from fill side, for tighter shots is stronger, so we feel more. Just compare with the contrast on over the shoulder. It's the contrast is higher on over the shoulder, and here we feel a bit more. But the core idea stays the same, of course. We see the key light coming from frame right, as we try to sell as if the light comes from the window. And the middle shot of the sheriff. Now the camera is positioned lower than it was on over the shoulder for him, but still above his eye line. We see a lot of contrast on his face on the right side. And even though the light is quite fronty, I would say, there is still a noticeable difference between the key side, yeah, this is the key side, and the fill side. And here we are, two scenes and two examples of how the mastery of the great DP can transform something potentially not looking good into something really awesome visually. I hope you found this episode Sidelight for an Old Man interesting and useful. If so, give this video a like and consider subscribing. As always, I would like to hear from you. Drop your comments below. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time. Bye bye.